Welcome, everyone, to the. Oh, we didn't come up with a name.
You
Uh,
know the name, dear listener. You know
yeah,
the name of this.
welcome to our first episode of this podcast that we're doing. Um, my name is Jordan Ross. I'm here with Injun Yoon and Andrew Price. Um, three guys who just love movies and everything about movies and talking about movies. And this is our podcast where each week we have a theme or a prompt. The three of us then come up with a question based on that theme or prompt, and then we pose that question to each other, and we just have a informal discussion about movies. So,
And that's why we've called our podcast Cues About M's, questions about movies. And
yeah.
that's the name that stuck.
Um,
No, nope, keep going.
I like it.
and yeah, since this is our first episode, the theme or the kind of prompt of our questions this week is the word first. So, Andrew, why don't you start us off with your question for the
Okay,
for all?
I'll be the first for this topic. So I have a question that I kind of hope will go a certain place, but we all have different childhoods, so I don't know where this will land. But I was curious from the both of you what the first movie that you identified as your favorite movie was. So to be clear, I'm not talking about what your actual first movie was, like the movie you watched a million times when you were little. It's sort of like when you gained an awareness of ranking things, some of these artificial things that surround like loving movies, and became aware of lists and all the culture around that. What movie was the first one that you remember saying, this is my favorite movie? I'm just reading faces. I feel like Jordan knows and Injun is still trying to remember. But either one of you take it.
Me? Okay. Well, it's tricky because I think when I was really, really young, like I saw Lord of the Rings in like third grade or whatever. And those movies like just had a huge impact on me. And so I didn't even know what a director was, but after watching those movies, I was like, I want to do that. These are the greatest movies ever made. These are my favorite. And it kind of like really influenced me back then, but it wasn't like I was aware of like, oh, Steven Spielberg, like Peter Jackson, or I knew Peter Jackson, but like, George Lucas and Martin Scorsese. Like I had no like other kind of things to go off of. I was like, oh, this is an amazing movie. This is my favorite. I want to do this. Which is just kind of like that's more or less how that movie influenced me and impacted me, I think. Um, but if I jump forward a few years when I am aware of that stuff, I think it would have been Hot Fuzz, which I saw probably either way too young, just at the right time. I don't know which one. And that was definitely my favorite movie for a little stitch in elementary school.
Injun. Jordan, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire for just a second. Did you say, like, if we were around the tape of your life, at some point would we hear you say Hot Fuzz is my favorite movie, like
Yeah.
to a group of friends? Yeah.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't necessarily have heard you say that about like the Fellowship of the Ring, or you loved them, they set you on fire, but you weren't like, the Fellowship of the Ring is my favorite movie, and my second favorite movie is blah blah blah. My third favorite is this.
Yeah. I would be like, Lord of the Rings is the best. There's no competition with anything else. Nothing else exists, kind of thing. And part of that was just because of how young I was, I think. I just wasn't aware of other movies as much.
Right. Sure. Okay, Injun.
Yeah, I think just to go off of the Lord of the Rings thing, in fifth grade yearbook, everyone had to say what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I want to be an animator for Weta Workshop. It was just extremely specific. Everyone else was like had like pretty broad general things. I was like, no, I want to be the person who makes the like previs animatics, right? It was
Amazing.
It was very funny. It was very funny. I think I would say that. So for me, this was probably around like end of high school, early college, when I was like decided to seriously pursue some sort of film. And around that point, I would say that my favorite film was Blade Runner. It was just like, for one thing, it was the one that everyone said was their favorite. It was either Blade Runner or Pulp Fiction. Every film, every film major, every film wannabe either says one of those. I feel like, or quite often does. And I feel like Blade Runner was just it was one of those movies that I didn't fully really know exactly what it was trying to say, but I feel like it was trying to say something, and that in and of itself made me feel like it was like deep and interesting and like had lots of interesting things to say. I don't feel that way about that movie now. I think the second one is honestly way better. But yeah, I would say Blade Runner was probably the first one.
And sorry, you said that was just coming out of high school, kind of.
Yeah, coming out of high school, going into college. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Pulp Fiction, because whenever I picture a typical like film school person, it's like Pulp Fiction poster, Dark Knight poster, Fight Club. That's like the holy trinity right there.
Yes, Fight Club for sure, definitely.
I feel there's probably different generations of film students too, because so for me, I don't know if it's bad form to answer your own question, but I probably around about 15 years old or so. I'm bad at grades because I was homeschooled, so I never remember so around 15 years old or so, I started saying that 12 Angry Men was my favorite movie. And I remember, I know that I just said it because I thought it was like an important movie, and it did make me I had an emotional response to the movie for sure, but also seeing it on different, like the AFI list, and I think it's on there, and things like that. It just like felt important with a capital I, and I was like, this is my favorite movie. And then and it definitely wasn't like, when I think of my favorite movie now, I think of more of like just purely just an emotional reaction. Like, I don't care what anyone else thinks of this movie. Like, this is just the movie that hits me. But yeah, back then it was like, I ran it through a ton of different filters of like, what does this person think of it? What does this person think of it? How many different lists have I seen the movie on? And it was quickly replaced by Citizen Kane, which is like so cliche. I was just like, Citizen Kane's my favorite movie. And it's like, oh, it's a pure coincidence that it's at the top of all these different movie lists. It just took forever. And this is kind of where I wanted to go, was like maybe a follow-up question, which is just like, once you went, this was my journey, and I don't think it was Jordan's, but in Jen and I, it sounds like we have some similarities where you sort of pick a movie that you feel like you should pick, and then eventually you move to a place where it's like, well, I just love this movie. This is just really working for me. So I guess I would just ask for a follow-up from both of you, where just sort of honestly, what was the first movie that you, when did it line up that you were like, this is my favorite movie, and you genuinely that was the movie that you loved most?
Well, a little side note about that story that reminds me of is, there's a director, Matt Johnson. He's a Canadian kind of younger filmmaker. He's only made 2 features, and he does a TV show, but he tells a story about when he went to film school. or he did like a film camp in New York or something when he was in like middle school or high school, and he was around all these kind of really film literate people who were always saying, "What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie?" Super pretentious kind of like film snobs, and he would say, Notorious," just and he had never seen it, but he thought that made him sound cool because
Yes.
you're around all these film fans and everything,
Yeah.
and like that got him like film street cred because that was like one of his favorite movies. And yeah, I think we all kind of I can relate to like checking off the you know ooh, is my favorite movie validated by other critics and lists worldwide and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at a certain point after, right, like after going through film school and like doing all of that stuff, I just realized, you know what, my favorite movie is probably just the original Star Wars. And like, it's like the one that had the most impact on me. Yeah, it's like, and right, it's not a very, super quick anecdote, right? Like when I started at my current job as a software developer, uh, we had a video meeting to meet with the other offices, right? And everyone knew my background, so everyone, of course, asked me. So one person from a different office asked me, "Oh, what's your favorite movie?" And I said Star Wars, and they were like, "No, that can't be your favorite movie, like that, right?" Like they said that, like it needs to be a film, it needs to be a film, and I was like, I don't know what to say, like. I know where that's coming from, but
Yeah.
like like so yeah, it's just like that is what it is, and it's a great movie. It has everything I want. So, yeah, I'm just coming to terms with that.
And when would you say that was that you figured that out?
Probably end of college, like speaking, college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
I feel like for me, I didn't know what my favorite movie was until I had made a bunch of movies myself. And then I didn't even know what I was looking for in a movie. And I didn't even know whether or not I liked a movie until I started making a lot of movies myself. And I started picturing that I was giving feedback to the writer and director after each time I watched the movie. And I'd be like, here's what I would change. Here's what I loved. And then once I had that framework to start thinking about movies, then I actually had my own opinions. But that wasn't until my early 20s that I actually had opinions.
And Andrew, isn't yours Empire Strikes Back? Is that your favorite?
My favorite, I mean,
Because that would be a similarity between you two.
there's no like, ask me again in 5 seconds. But in general, I say It's a Wonderful Life. Like that's the one that it's like, I genuinely enjoy it, and it's also like feels. Roger Ebert talked about he like shortly before he died, he published his 5 favorite movies of all time list, and 2 or 3 of them he said, "This is my life except for the details. Like, this is pretty much autobiographical except for some details," and that's how I feel about It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah.
Nice.
And Jordan, we gotta get you in there. But it sounds like you, from the beginning, you didn't struggle as much with like what you should like versus what you actually do just love.
No, that was something that actually came up in like college and like high school because I always just liked what I liked. I didn't really care what people thought. But then, it's like you get into like hardcore movies in high school and I'm like, oh man, I thought like Watchmen was amazing. I still do. But I was like feeling ashamed because all these film snobs are like saying doesn't represent the book. You ruined Zack Snyder, blah blah blah, which I totally disagree with. But there's an extent when you hang out in these circles or kind of go online in these little circles and bubbles where it feels like you almost feel ashamed for liking something that you like. So it's not like I ever didn't like it, but it was like I felt embarrassed. And then it wasn't until like maybe ironically like Man of Steel or BVS when I was like, you know what? I don't like this is all subjective because I love watching like George Kuchar, like his weather diaries. And I love like Sadie Benning, her little movies, experimental films that she made on her thing. And if that's cinema, then so is like a giant superhero blockbuster. So is everything else. It's all valid. And I just realized how ridiculous the whole like notion of like this is objectively bad kind of mentality is. Well, now I'm more like, so for the last 7-8 years or whatever, I've been a lot more confident in like, yeah, I just like whatever I like, and I don't really care what other people think. But let me tell you, it was rough when being in film school when Batman v Superman came out. That was rough. I came in like the day after that came out, and everybody's like, "Man, that movie was sucked," but and just like would rant about it, and I'm just like, I put in my earbuds, try to ignore it best I can. But yeah,
I'm just going to bridge off that just real quick because now we're off topic, and you two haven't even had a chance to give questions. But we were talking off podcast about Batman versus Superman, and I just remember kind of the hatred in the ether, like for that movie. And I would have told you that I didn't like the movie, but I hadn't even seen it. I watched it like 3 months ago, and it doesn't do for me what it does for you, but it also is totally on par with at least 2/3 of like Marvel's movies, in my opinion. It's not like the this like abysmal pit of like lack of talent. There was something in the air. It was really that's like a whole topic for a whole other time. I don't know, Jordan, you could talk for 12 hours.
I could, yeah, I could talk for hours about that.
But I just wanted to say that there was, I think a lot of that hatred had nothing to do with the movie itself and was coming from just, it was a cool thing to hate. It's just like, negative talk is cool, and negative talk about that at that time was cool. So
that's definitely something that I've also seen a lot in like the film circles online, is like it's cool to hate on movies and it's easy to do, and people for whatever reason like listening to that stuff. Whereas like if I'm listening to something and people just start bashing a movie, no matter what the movie, even if I don't like it, I'll generally like switch to something else because I'm like, you know what? I don't rant about movies I don't like. I just ignore them. I'm like, oh, I didn't care for that, and I just don't think about it from that point on. So, yeah. And June, you should ask your question.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm out.
All right. My question is a little like, it's pretty straightforward. So I'll ask it and I'll answer it. So you both have time to think about it. But my question is, what is the first R-rated movie you guys ever saw? And then for me, it was 7th grade. I was a wee lad of 12, and we saw Gladiator for my social studies class. And we saw it in parts, and some of the more graphic parts he cut out. Our teacher was like, we're going to skip through this. But we saw that, and I thought it was so cool. And I had to get a written permission slip from my parents saying that I was allowed to watch this. But
that's a good one. That's a good first movie.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Yeah, it's true. So
I love this question because that is such a rite of passage. In watching movies, your first R-rated movie.
Mm-hmm.
My first R-rated movie. So my uncle always harasses me about movies. As soon as I started like declaring my love for movies and like being a filmmaker, he would be like, "Have you seen this one? Have you seen this one?" And for a while, it was The Shawshank Redemption, and he was like, "It's so good," and he's like, "It's like an allegory about this and this," and so he bought it for me for my birthday, and I'm sure I was like 21 or so. Like I wasn't young. I had a very conservative childhood, so So it was probably like the same time. Uh, anyway, I no, that's not true. I was trying to say that Injun, you were 12 the same time I was like 21, but that's not quite true. So, but it was yeah. So yeah, so he bought me the Shawshank Redemption, and I like waited till like everyone was asleep in the house, and I still lived with my parents at the time too, and like everyone was asleep, and I just like put it on my little computer, and it was like it was one of the first movies too that was like my movie, like that I owned, and I started like my little movie collection. So so I just watched it a few times because it was just like this ritual. Like I'm gonna watch like this rated movie by myself, and I just like felt so independent doing that. And I don't even know if I'll watch it again. Like I think it's a great movie, but I also it's not like tip top of like what I'm looking for kind of thing. I think Lizzie wants to watch it. My wife wants to watch it, and to just because there's so many cultural references around it, and so I think I'll probably watch that with her at some point. And but yeah, it has like a special place in my heart for being the first.
Nice. That's a movie. Side note: that's a movie where before I saw it, the only thing I knew about it was that at some point during the movie, a guy crawls through poop, like a big like sewer line of poop, and I was like, whoa, that. I kept seeing Shawshank Redemption, and I would just associate with that's the poop movie where he's the sewers and he's like happy, and I had no idea what it was about. But all that was all I knew about it.
Did that spoil the movie for you then? Were you like, I know what's coming? I know there's like
yeah, because I spoiled it for me eventually because I was like, okay, I got to see this poop scene, and I watched it and I saw him escape and be like free, and then I learned it was about a prison escape, and I was like, oh well. No, he escapes now. So
right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, to have the most famous shot of the movie be like standing in the rain, like I'm free, is unfortunate, spoiler wise.
It's also on the poster, which I guess you might not realize when you go into it too. Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation. Is since becoming a parent, I've started and stopped movies way more than I used to. And so I'll start a movie and then I'll have to stop it. And then I'll look at the cover again and I'll be like, it'll like give away, like once like the milieu of the movie and kind of the story sort of in motion, then like different vignettes or whatever that are on the cover will be like totally spoiled, like what's happening later.
Yeah.
But you just look at it and it's just like, graphic design information when you don't know anything about the movie, and then halfway through you're like, oh, I'm picking up like, oh, well, this character must be more significant than they seem because they're here on the cover. Like, I wonder if they're going to be the villain or something.
Yeah.
Different topic.
I think for me, the first R-rated, or I guess the first part of an R-rated movie I saw was Stand By Me, because my family, my mom's dad's side, so my grandpa's side of the family, they live in Hood River, and I think that's where they filmed it, around near that area. And we had the guy who plays the body in Stand By Me, he was a family friend of like my great grandma, and so they're like, oh, it's great movie, we know that person and that kind of thing. So it would be in like the family gatherings and stuff, and I would remember seeing clips of it. And I think like the pie eating contest, that was a huge like thing I never forgot when I was a kid, because I just saw that pie clip or whatever, but I didn't actually see the full movie until much later. But the first one I saw was Terminator 2 in like must have been fourth grade, third grade maybe, and I didn't even realize it was a sequel. So I had no idea that there was another movie that it was a part of. I was just like, oh, I thought it was just T2. Like it was some tech kind of.
It's the name of the robot, T2. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I remember there's that scene where he cuts off like his spoiler alert. Arnold cuts off like a bit of his arm to prove that he's a robot. And I remember that to me at the time was like super gross because young kids seeing gore and everything. Now I don't have a problem with gore, but I remember very early on having that reaction of like, ugh, blood and gross. That's nasty.
We just have to pause for the listeners to know that when Jordan says he doesn't have a problem with gore, that is a huge understatement. Jordan literally has horror movies playing in the background, just like while he's going about his day. Is that still true, Jordan?
Yeah, it's still true. Shudder is an amazing subscription service, and I love that TV feature where you can just have movies playing like a TV channel. It's awesome.
Just to get like the comfort. It's like some people would like have a fire going in their home to get like a warm glow. You have horror movies playing, and it does the same thing for you, and that's great.
Yeah, like I really enjoy like the screams and the chainsaws and just that going on. It makes phone calls a little awkward sometimes, but yeah,
And I also wanted to jump in on your story because I think Terminator 2 is one of the great sequels of all time. I'm kind of obsessed with sequels, and that really sucks to jump right in with Terminator 2 because the first 20 minutes or so subvert so much of the first movie that there's like a lot of magic was lost for you.
But it definitely enhanced the first one in a new way, because when I saw the first one eventually, I was like, oh, he's not trying to kill her. Kyle Reese is the bad guy. This Terminator guy is going to help her. And so I was thinking that for the whole movie. And I was just waiting for Kyle Reese to turn and bad or something. But he never did. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And then I kind of realized the flip of like, oh,
so there was still a twist.
Yeah, it's a twist.
It's good. Terminator 1 had a twist, which is that Arnold's bad the whole time. That's great.
And I think I watched those movies in a weird order, like because I saw 2 and then I saw 3, but I didn't, because I was like, well, I've already seen what happens. I don't need to go back necessarily because I wanted to see what happened next. And then when I did see 1, it was that twist of, oh my gosh, it's the bad guy. It's crazy. And then like it enhanced my appreciation for T2, obviously.
Yeah. And I need to say too that I've never seen Gladiator, and I've never seen Stand By Me, and I've never seen Terminator 3. I just need to be honest about these movies that I've never seen.
We'll just have a running tally of movies we mentioned and we just mark down when one of us mentions one that the other ones haven't seen.
And I haven't seen any of the experimental films that you mentioned either, Jordan.
Same. I've never seen Stand By Me. I've never seen any of the Terminator movies. I've seen clips, but I've never seen any of them.
Oh man, we just spoiled the great.
Well, I mean,
sequel
and I'm aware of the overall story, but yeah, I've never seen it, which is a shame.
James Cameron knows how to make a sequel. Which is why there's a lot of another movie that's popular to hate, which I've never seen, is Avatar, and I think he still is going with these 3 to 5 or however many he's contracted. And a lot of people are rolling their eyes, but like James, Aliens and Terminator 2, like he really knows how to make a sequel. So I'm excited.
He definitely I don't know why you would doubt James Cameron, because the last 2 times that happened, he broke box office records. So it's like, just let him do his thing. He's good at what he does. Like, he's not like, whatever sequels he makes, they're gonna like make money, and it's gonna be at least, I mean, at the very least, it'll be like a really well made, technically like innovative movie to some extent, and that at least will be interesting. So it's definitely, I don't know, it's funny, like it's almost like every 10 years they're like, James Cameron, you're gonna screw up this movie, and then he makes the #1 box office hit or whatever.
I would not bet against him.
Yeah.
Have you both seen Avatar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's your take?
It's been a while. I saw it and I didn't love it that much. But I also didn't like hate it. It was like I think my main reaction was I thought it was a little overrated because there were so many people who did. I feel like so.
Did
that
you
was
see it in 3D?
no, I saw it on TV.
That's what happened with me. Is I didn't make up my mind to go see it until I had missed seeing it in 3D, and then and I'm hoping that when they release the sequel, they'll do a revival of the first one in 3D because it feels like that was at least 50% of the reason. Jordan, did you like it?
Yeah, it was funny because I remember my dad just surprised me after school one day. I think it was the day it came out, and he was like, "Hey, we're gonna go see Avatar." I was like, "Okay, cool." And my friends were like, "Dude, why are you seeing that? It looks like garbage. It looks like trash." Because they're like edgy middle schoolers and stuff. And I see the movie, and I was like, "Oh, that was pretty good. It wasn't amazing, but I enjoyed like on the technical aspect that was great, and I did enjoy it." And then the next I think the following Monday, everybody else had seen it, and they were like, "Oh, have you seen Avatar? This is the greatest movie ever made." And I was like, "You were just saying how dumb, whatever." And it was funny
Yeah.
how it just like people flip and change their minds so quickly. I mean, it was middle school, so
You can't believe what people say around. Anyway, this is I propose another topic of just like hype or anti-hype around movies and kind of different generations of those.
I could have so much to say about John Carter with that.
Oh
the
yeah,
Disney movie.
Yeah,
I'd love to
Yeah.
revisit John Carter. That'd be great.
that movie so good. The first time I saw it, I did not like it. Okay, I want.
Well, we're at that point now where we've gone through all our questions. I have.
Wait, Jordan, did you
Wait.
do your question?
Did we?
No.
You did.
Oh, I
No, I
didn't.
didn't.
I'm getting
No,
ahead of
Jordan,
myself.
what's your question?
Let's see. Where'd it go? I had it written down. We kind of went over a few of these, but I'll pick this. I'll pick this one. What was the first time? This is kind of going back to Andrew's question. What was the first time or first movie you saw that you really enjoyed, but everybody else hated?
This
So
is such
kind
a
of-
Jordan question too.
I know it's
This is your story with movies.
with movies, yeah. Good, but kind of like that. I don't want to say what is it called? Guilty pleasure. I don't believe in guilty pleasure. I think if you enjoy a movie, it's a good movie. So I'm just curious to see what you guys think. You can call a movie the first time you really liked a movie and you found out it was not popular.
I don't have an answer, but in true Andrew fashion, I'm going to talk anyway for just a second because you and I, Jordan, are so different in that my internal compass is pretty well broken, or at least started out broken, and I was so subject to the vibe around a movie and that's what I should think about that movie. So it's very possible that I won't have an answer for you because it could be that I can think of some movies that are sort of you're dancing around the term guilty pleasure, that could sort of be labeled that, but I may come up short here for you.
So I don't know. I don't think this is exactly. I don't think it fits exactly because I think this movie was relatively critically well received, but it was something that my friends didn't really like. And this was Steven Soderbergh's Haywire.
Mm-hmm.
That movie I saw and I was like, oh, this is like really cool, and I really liked it, and it was like just a very cool, kind of like what I wanted with like a Bourne type movie, but with a female lead. And I was like in that phase in my life when I was like, oh, this is like very much my jam. But and I thought it did some things kind of interestingly, but a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, I think it's kind of boring. I don't really." It wasn't like they didn't like it, but they just didn't really care for it. And I was like, "Oh, I like it."
Yeah.
And it's not a movie that I don't think it's really stuck in anyone's consciousness, or no one really talks about it that much. But that's a movie that I still really like.
Gina Carano is she's really good in that movie, I thought. And I'm
Yeah,
surprised she's not in
yeah.
a lot more. I mean, she's been in Deadpool and Mandalorian, but I feel like she should be in. She's not.
Oh no,
We lost you for a second.
for a
Can
second.
you hear me?
You said she was in Deadpool and Mandalorian, and then that's where you cut out.
Oh, she's been in those huge. Those are pretty hugely successful movies, but she's just not. You would expect her to be in a lot more action movies, and
Yeah.
she's just not, which I find surprising.
She plays the shock trooper then in Mandalorian. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'm still Elizabeth and I are working our way through. We started watching separately and now we've synced up and I've rewatched episode 4, 3 and 4, and that's as far as I've got there.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like I've had that reaction with a lot of. Sorry, super quick. I feel like
Yep.
I've had that reaction with a lot of Steven Soderbergh movies. I really like Side Effects, and my friends were like, I don't really care about this movie. And I really
Side
like.
Effects is fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't finish watching it for the toddler reasons already mentioned. I'll just state this for the record. There's a phenomenon in my life where I rely on the library a lot for movies. So I'll get a movie from the library, I'll start watching it, then my son will wake up from his nap or whatever, and I'll like put it away, and then it'll be due, and then I'll have to like really go through a lot of effort to like get the movie back. So I have started a lot of movies due to that exact phenomenon. But Haywire is so fascinating, and all this different frame rates and just all the rules they break with how many different types of cameras they use and that kind of thing. But yeah, Steven Soderbergh seems like he doesn't really care too much about connect. Well, it's not true because he made like Ocean's 11, but it's like being kind of sticky and like really bringing someone in does not seem to be like a priority with his work.
Yeah. Did you guys see Logan Lucky?
No,
I love
not
that
yet.
movie. Oh, I love that movie.
Is it? They market it as like a really pretty fun, light on its feet kind of deal. Did it feel that way?
Yes, it's like Ocean's 11 in the South.
Okay, and he made Magic Mike too. That's so funny. He's a hard one to pin down, which I'm sure is exactly what he wants us to say about it.
He also was the cinematographer on Magic Mike 2, but he didn't direct it, which is super fascinating. I've never heard of a director doing that.
That's so
yeah.
Paul
Rowan was his own EP on Roma. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. Sorry, Andrew, go for it. It's all you.
No, I think I'm going to sidestep your question and just talk about times where you sort of loved something counterculturally to like your immediate culture. And I think so. My journey of loving movies was like being a kid with a pretty conservative childhood and watching like a lot of Disney. It's like Disney plus Star Wars, plus any movie made before 1955. So like super well versed on like Howard Hawks and and John Ford and all that. And then I went from there to like the great movies, like Tokyo Story. Like you have to picture like an 18-year-old like sitting down with his like brothers like and sister to watch Tokyo Story, just because of like what we were reading, and Vertigo and The Third Man, and I grew up with Casablanca, so that one. But and so and like Kubrick and stuff. So I hit like but none of the like rated R great movies. So like not Psycho, not The Shining, but yes, Notorious, and yes, 2001. So a lot of like the greats, and then I discovered like Will Ferrell, and so I went from like very classic golden age Hollywood to top shelf, what by film critics are considered like the best movies of all time, to just like these movies really work for me. It's like a lot of Adam McKay. And it was just after Anchorman. I wasn't a part of like the Anchorman bro wave that kind of happened where you can like my cousin can just like quote Anchorman from start to finish. So for me, I think Step Brothers is to me like one of the great movies of all time, and I don't know if there's anyone that agrees with me on that. But to me, it's just like so aggressively good and funny, and I'm also, I say like one of the greats of all time, but I'm trying to move away from like objective conversations around movies and just be, even though I do feel that way, I'm, language wise, I would feel more comfortable saying like I love it so much. And there's also, and to a lesser extent, like Talladega Nights and Anchorman, but Step Brothers, for whatever reason, is just like is cinema at its one of its highest expressions.
There's a lot I can with comedy films. I don't know if I rank those lower necessarily than other movies, but the comedy movies I would consider would be like the greatest comedy movies aren't because they're like really well shot or well crafted. It's just because they're super, super funny and they made me laugh a lot. Like, so I think we might have talked about this before, but like Hot Rod, I think that's one of the funniest movies to me in the world. And to see that on a list with like Vertigo or like Apocalypse Now, it's like, it doesn't really connect, but like you can't judge those two types of movies in the same way. And for me, it's like Hot Rod would absolutely be on like greatest comedies of all time for me, even though like, critics would probably put like Duck Soup, Monty Python's Holy Grail on it, and all that kind of more classy or like Wes Anderson type comedies. So it's it's funny. Yeah.
The big one that kind of defines what you're talking about is Doctor Strangelove, which is like this like perfectly executed, really well shot. But to me, I don't find it funny at all. Like I don't connect with Doctor Strangelove in the least. So that would for me be an example of like a great, like perfect execution that ended up with something that doesn't actually work. And that's what I look for in movies, is like what works. And so to me, Apocalypse Now totally works, and Step Brothers equally totally works for me. Yeah. So to me, they do belong on the same list. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
June, did you answer? No, you said
Steven Soderbergh. Yeah, Haywire.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
And I think this isn't really an answer, but my answer would be kind of like, it would be the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, because those were movies I grew up loving. They were a huge part of my childhood. I still love them to death, but there was a point when I got to a certain age when I realized, oh wait, people hate these movies. There's just this so like hardcore hatred for these movies. Like anytime I go online, anytime I talk to someone, usually it felt like in middle school. And it was definitely during that kind of prequel hate train, like the peak of that, like 2005, 2006 kind of era of in the Star Wars kind of timeline, production wise, and all that. So it's not really like, and the reason I asked that is because I've never really, that's kind of always been a part of my DNA, as you said, Andrew. I've always, for the most part, just liked what I liked. It was just a matter of if I was embarrassed or not about liking what I liked and overcoming that. And I tend to like a lot of movies that, you know, critics, hate or don't care for. Um, and I'm just curious to see what your guys' experience with, guilty pleasures, for lack of a better word, would be. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why mine doesn't really qualify, because like Step Brothers would be on a list of like great comedies of all time, or at least an Adam McKay, Will Ferrell movie would be on there somewhere. So that may, one day I'll watch a movie and no one else will like it, but that's like my character arc in life. Like eventually I'll get there. And I'll let you know what that movie is when it happens, but I'm not mature enough to be there yet.
That's funny. Okay. So now we've gotten through all the questions. I have a couple of kind of random questions inspired by the prompt first that I can just kind of do a rapid fire round, or or if there's anything on your minds out of this conversation so far, we can jump into that. Do you guys have a preference?
I like the rapid fire.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think rapid fire is great, and I just want to put a bookmark in talking about Gladiator and growing up as like an evangelical Christian, and like Gladiator, Braveheart, the Patriot, like a few of those. That's like there's a whole thing around there. But I think rapid fire questions are a great idea.
Okay. So first one, we might have already covered this to an extent, but what was the first movie that got you hooked on movies?
And would you say movies in terms of like, I'm aware that this is a movie being made by a group of people and seeing behind the curtain a little bit, or would you say just like you watched it and you just connected with it and you're like, I want more?
I would say more or less the second one. What I'm thinking is, when everybody's a kid, some people like sports, some people like books, music, whatever, drawing, whatever you're into. What was the movie that you saw where you're like, this is my thing? Because we're all film people. We all went to film school. We are all like in that film sphere and involved with the production of movies to like various extents. So what was the movie that got you hooked on like, oh, movies are my thing?
I think for me, I'm gonna go back to my answer for the 5th grade yearbook and say The Fellowship of the Ring. I think that was it. That was when I was like, oh, I want to be involved in this.
So this isn't necessarily like when I saw the mechanics behind the curtain, but the movie that like rocked my world and defined my childhood in a lot of ways was Toy Story. I was like eight or nine when that came out, and I didn't see it in theaters. We moved to Europe in 19, I think it came out in 95. We moved in like a month after it came out, and it was a whole year of just listening to the tape of like the little narrator guy like reading, like summarizing the movie with little bits of dialogue, and watching the trailer over and over again, like watching Cinderella on VHS so that I could watch the Toy Story trailer in front of it. And then a year later, we got it for Christmas from my grandma, and she sent it over. And yeah, that movie just rearranged everything in my world.
That's great. I'm with Injun. Lord of the Rings, that whole trilogy, that was the one that got me hooked on movies. That was the one that made me realize I wanted to go into movies. So that's Lord of the Rings for me.
I'm just gonna tag something to keep in theme with you guys. My friends and I would always talk about making movies forever, and then we watched a short that I'm blanking on. Sean Astin. I think Sean Astin directed a little short using the different heights of people that were involved in Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you watched this. but they used, so it has one of the little people and then like more of a standard sized person and then the person who was like the double for Gandalf around hobbits. There was something involving a ladder or something, and my friends and I, we just like watched this movie together, and my friend Nathan was like, we always talk about making a movie, let's just make one. We were in the middle of like writing a script for like this terrible fantasy movie called The Sword, and
That's amazing.
anyway, yeah, and he's like, let's just make one. And so we just grabbed my little camera that didn't even have an SD card, and we went out in the backyard and started filming a movie where this guy's playing chess against himself. It was my friend Nathan played every role in the movie, and I was directing because I was the camera operator basically, and then I was also editing. And when I edited my friend Nathan waving to himself, that's when I fell in love with making movies. It just like there was this little zing that happened. It was like, oh, this can only happen through this. And yeah, so just to piggyback on Lord of the Rings, that was how I actually, in a weird way, from something that happened behind the scenes for those movies, how I fell in love with movies and making movies.
That's great. In June, did you have, was there a moment when you were like, I want to make movies, or was it always just, because you've worked on film sets and you worked on stuff, but I also, when I think of you, I think of like, you know, your whole Westworld essay and like someone who really loves analyzing movies. But do you have like that
Oh, fine. No. We're alone in June.
Oh no, it's just you and me. I can see Jordan's frozen face.
Yeah. Are you?
Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Technical problems. To sum up quickly, you know, do you was there ever a time when you were like, I really like have to make movies, or I want to get into this more?
As opposed to, or like, wait, sorry, what was the question?
Okay, sorry.
Was there?
I'll go back. So when I think of you in June, I know you've been involved with productions and stuff, but I've also read your writings and analysis kind of stuff on movies, and it's super good. And so I think that you're kind of more of a, not like you're not a filmmaker or anything, but I mean, like when I think of you, I'm like, oh, In June's a great movie watcher, has great thoughts and like kind of opinions on movies. But do you feel like, was there ever a point when you saw something and you're like, oh, I have to make movies? It's not enough just to write about them. I got to make movies too.
That's a good question. I think I started out with like Lord of the Rings, with Star Wars, like, and watching this. I think I started out more like that, and like, oh, I think I want to make these. And then as I got, you know, more experience making them and like actually making them, I just realized, like, for one thing, I didn't really over time I realized that I actually think I was more interested in criticism rather than production, honestly, or at the very least in like editing and writing rather than, I just didn't like, over time I realized I didn't like being on set. Let's put it that way. And it's like, there's definitely there's a part of being on set that I do really enjoy. Like, there's a certain energy to that I really like, even like with like our film center summer camps and stuff, like being in like that sort of producer role and being a helper, but letting the students actually make it. That is great. I love that. Just having that backseat role, kind of, that advisory role, kind of. But like actually being on set, actually holding the boom, I don't know. It's just not for me, I think.
Yeah.
I love that you bring up holding the boom. That's just like the perfect summary of a very specific. Yeah. It's how it's like the difference between screenwriting and holding a boom. It's just both of them are working on a movie, but there's an infinite gap between those two things.
Yeah. I think what Andrew, what you brought up about like just like seeing that moment in editing, I think I very much relate to that. Just like being able to piece shots together and have it make this sense and realizing, oh, this is exactly like what I saw like on TV. Like this cut is exactly that. And like all of a sudden it just works. Like that's very cool. Yeah, I completely and I love that.
Nice. I'll go to the next question.
How's rapid fire going, Jordan?
I know this is fine because it's creating conversation. I don't feel bad if we spend a lot of time on one of these questions.
I vow on this next question to give a one sentence answer.
Okay. This might be a tough one. But so think of your favorite movie of all time now. When was the first time you saw that movie? Or do you remember when you saw your favorite movie?
I mentioned that my favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life, and like a lot of people, I was exposed to that movie in bits and pieces, and or so at different points in my childhood, I watched it. Semicolon, and we had it recorded on VHS, but it didn't have the ending for some reason, which is totally not how you're supposed to watch It's a Wonderful Life. So for a long time, I had only seen like the first 2 acts of It's a Wonderful Life, and the big joke in our house was like, why is this movie called It's a Wonderful Life?
That's funny.
And I don't know when I actually sat down and watched the whole movie, but I was probably 15 or 16 or something.
All right.
Period.
My favorite movie, or the one else, there's a few, but my favorite movie is Star Wars in the UK. And I mean, that's probably also the very first live action movie I've seen, like in my life. So I don't remember exactly, but I was probably like 6 or 7 when I first saw it. And I think it was at my friend's house, and it was very cool.
Nice. Mine would be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I saw that in high school, and I didn't love it. I liked it the first time I saw it, but when I decided or like I realized it was my favorite was I got it on Blu-ray for Christmas, and I watched it with my grandpa on this giant TV he has, and just something about like experiencing it again that second time and seeing it again all the way through. That was when I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I think that was still in high school, somewhere around there. I don't remember the exact date, but it was a Christmas when I realized it was my favorite. Yeah. So next
one. I just wanted to warn you that I'm probably gonna have to duck out of the call pretty soon.
Perfect. Well, let's just make this. We'll just make this one our last one.
Okay.
What was the first movie that made you cry?
Oh, that's a good one.
To some extent, I'm grasping at straws, but I think that it's probably pretty close to accurate to say it's The Iron Giant. There was also like a time in my life where I didn't cry, and then something happened, and then I cried all the time at the drop of a hat, and I was introduced to Iron Giant around that time. So that's probably accurate.
I don't really cry. Well, no, I definitely have cried during movies, but I don't remember. Wow, that's
Just while you're thinking, I'm just going to say Jordan must be laughing at least a little bit because I'm pretty sure that he's seen me cry during movies, like, because we worked together during summer camp and I show like Up and Iron Giant and Wall-E and and it's always like on the last day that we watch this movie, like I'm sitting, like the kids are up front and they're like middle schoolers, so they're being very rude about everything, and I'm in the back and I'm just like super bad.
It's funny.
You'll have to ask me again. I mean, it's definitely happened, but I don't remember.
All
Do you
right.
remember a movie that you've cried during ever?
I'm trying to come up with that too.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
And in June, you've also seen me cry during a movie because we watched Infinity War together,
oh, that's true. Yeah.
and I'm just like sitting there like.
I can't remember. I can't say.
No worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
Jordan, how about you?
I know I cried a few times during a movie when I was really little, but I can't remember it. I'm inclined to say Return of the Jedi because I think I've mentioned to you guys before. I really didn't want Yoda to die when I saw that when I was really young, and I have this vague memory of my mom saying it's okay, he's just a movie character to me. So I think it might have been Return of the Jedi, and like so much she had to stop the movie and turn it off. And I think it might have been Return of the Jedi, but the one I definitely remember the most was Grave of Fireflies, and I saw that I think in high school. And if you haven't seen that, this isn't spoiling anything, but the opening scene is like this teenage kid in Tokyo or in like Japan after the bombings and everything. He like dies homeless in a crowded like subway like platform, and it's just and like that sets the tone for the entire movie. And there's parts where you think you might get better, but it doesn't. It's just a downer of a movie, man. And it was just very intense. So that's the one that's one I definitely remember. But Return of the Jedi, I think that's probably the first, but I can't actually be sure. Yeah.
I shoot, I remembered what the movie is for me, but I don't remember the name. It is it's a French movie, and this was in my like watching the greats kind of kick. She's the youngest actress to win Best Actress at Cannes, so that seems like something I could find on the internet pretty quick. But the name of the movie is just her name. It's this like 2-year-old girl, and the opening scene, and this, what you said made me think of this, is her being informed that her mom died in a car accident, and she's just weeping, and I was just like, she's so good at this, and I'm crying too.
I've seen that movie and I can't remember the name. What is it? Oh, this is killing me.
I think just to jump in, I think I was going to say I don't really know, but I feel like for me the answer was some Studio Ghibli movie. Going off of Grave of the Fireflies. Yeah. Like some Miyazaki or one of those movies for sure.
My son's not quite awake yet. Can I lob a rapid fire question in there, Jordan?
Go for it.
Okay. Just speaking of crying in movies, my first memory of being in a movie is because someone was crying. So what's your first memory at a movie theater?
Oh, that's a good one.
Phantom Menace for me.
And when you say that, what are you picturing? Is it a specific scene, or is it people around you? We know it's not the wider audience.
I picture, so I was really little. I saw it multiple times, but I'm at, this is very specific. I'm at the Regal Tigard 11 Cinema in, I think it's Tigard. I'm in there. The crowd is I can't even picture the crowd because I'm only focused on me. It's the opening scene where Qui-Gon is like cutting through the door,
Yeah.
and I'm in there with a toy lightsaber play fighting in the aisles.
Oh wow.
That's
Wow, wow,
amazing.
wow. So you're not like glued to your seat.
No,
Are you imitating what's on screen, or are you
Yeah,
only checking in?
I'm imitating what's on screen, and I'm like playing it out with the movie. And I remember my aunts and my mom arguing about if I was, because I had a lightsaber with a blade that could come off, and they were arguing, take him without the blade, he'll hit people. My other one would be going, no, he's not going to be hit. He'll do it in the aisles. He'll be fine. And I very clearly remember them arguing about if I was allowed to take the blade with my lightsaber.
That's so
Amazing.
funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
All right,
Oh,
Engine. Or I'll talk mine while you're thinking. It's just
please.
It's my neighbor. So my friend Hannah Elledge. We lived on the same street, and I wouldn't remember seeing this movie. It's Rescuers Down Under, except that I remember like looking at her and feeling really distressed because she was crying at the end of the movie when Cody says, "Let's all go home." And I look over at her and she's crying. And I didn't know you could cry because things worked out well. I just was like, oh man, something terrible happened. And she's not with the movie. Like, what's going on? So I just remember asking her why she was crying. And I know that movie came out before any other movie that I have a memory of seeing, like Aladdin or anything like that. So I know that was the first one that I remember.
I think I remember seeing. I don't fully remember. I think I remember seeing Mulan in theaters, and I just remember being really scared because there's that one shot where the hand comes out of the snow. I was like, ah! I scared easily as a kid. I scare easily.
Not so anymore.
So yeah, I think it was that.
Nice.
Incidentally, Jordan, that may be my actual answer to like a countercultural movie. Is I deeply love Rescuers Down Under, and I can't find anyone else who's like, this is one of the best Disney movies of all time. Like I can't, like, to me it's like so obviously, I love it just so much more than any of the musicals that came out in the same like time during the Renaissance and stuff. And I just I feel like I'm in an alternate reality, which is probably how you feel all the time, where it's just like, how are we watching different movies? Like, how can you not see like how good this movie is?
Yeah. So that's definitely like your number one underrated movie.
I think so. And then in recent years, it's been Brigsby Bear. But yeah, there's a few movies out there that I'm just that. And now that I'm thinking of it in terms of underrated, I could give you a whole list of that. But yeah.
Nice. Well, I think we reached the end of our podcast here. Let's do a quick wrap up. Which one of you wants to pick the prompt for the next episode? You don't have to decide the prompt now, but you can. Who wants to pick it?
Engine pointed at me, so me.
All right.
Unless he was pointing like at his computer at a list of prompts that he's already written down.
That's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah, no, I'll pick the prompt, and it's just going to be second. You know, that's going to be first prompt first, second prompt second. I think it should be a math. It should be a math podcast where we just count. Like learn counting.
We don't do any actual math, just count.
You know what? I actually already know. It is going to be sequel. I'm going to take a joke and make it into a real thing. And the theme is sequel.
Perfect. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. The next time you hear us, we'll be talking about sequels. And
Yay.
Yeah. So
this was so fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.